Three, two, one. Okay. Let's go ahead and start off by introducing yourself.
Sure, I'm Dan Dzuiba, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was an Air Force veteran, 4 years of service.
Wow. Very nice to meet you, Dan. I did not know, when I first saw your last name, I did not know that's how you pronounced it. Dziuba.
Yes.
Dziuba.
Yes.
Wow. Very interesting.
Polish.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Well, welcome to the Eagle's Nest.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and kind of get started right into talking a little bit about your service. So how long were you in the Air Force for?
It was 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah, 2016 to 2020.
Okay. And so what did you do while you were in the Air Force?
I was E&E. I was basically an aircraft electrician. And I was stationed in Kadena Air Force Base, Okinawa, Japan.
Okay.
And I was on Sikorsky HH-60 helicopters.
Oh.
So I didn't really. So part of my AFC was basically I was electrical and environmental. I didn't really do any of the environmental thing because that's more people that get on a plane airframe. So
Right.
then they deal with the oxygen and all of that stuff for
Oh, all
altitude.
the inside stuff for
Yes,
the airplane.
yes. So obviously a helicopter, this airframe isn't that high as far as altitude. So it was basically just I was an electrician.
Wow. Very
So-
cool. And you said you were from Milwaukee?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes,
So
correct.
were you stationed in that area, or where did you go for?
No.
How did you get into the military?
Okay, long story short, basically I joined when I was 38 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I had basically moved down to the Houston, Texas area from Milwaukee. It was more or less just kind of get down south. My current girlfriend at the time was a big advocate of just getting in the warmer weather, so I took a job with Union Pacific Railroad. With doing that, especially in that time period, Union Pacific was doing a big hiring spree. So I ended up getting into a mix of people that actually, with the railroad industry, is a huge. They hire a lot of veterans. And my wife herself is a veteran. Her dad's a veteran. My uncle served in the Marine Corps, so he's a veteran. He actually flew F-4 Phantom airplanes.
Wow.
Yeah, in the Vietnam era from '67 to '73.
That's interesting.
Very-
Where did what branch of the military did your wife serve?
Air Force.
Air Force?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. She was stationed in Holloman, New Mexico. She actually was a mechanic.
Oh.
She worked on flight line, basically fire trucks, type of service, flight line service vehicles.
Awesome.
So-
Very awesome. So what made you want to get into the military?
Well, I was kind of at an interesting spot in my life. I had taken the job at Union Pacific, which would a lot of people would consider an end-all job type of situation.
Oh,
and
really?
By trade, I'm like a trade. I was a machinist for 15 years, and then I've been working on cars and trucks and anything with an engine in it since basically I was like 18 years old.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of background, mechanical experience, and all that stuff. So taking the diesel mechanic position in Union Pacific was a good, jump forward. But I was hired at the tail end of a hiring spree, so my seniority level was real low. And if you know anything more about that industry, you actually don't hold you have a title, but you don't hold a job. So
Okay.
it's a union thing. It's union-based seniority.
Kind of like a status kind of thing.
Status would be a loose way of putting it. This is just basically you have a spot on a roster.
Okay.
And if you're really low on the roster, as they would say, can you swear on this?
We'll edit in post.
Oh, okay. Well, the poop drains downhill.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
basically, you're bottom tier. So if you bid on a job, you basically every week you're supposed to bid on a job. You might win that job for a couple of weeks, but then all of a sudden somebody will, they'll open up some other jobs, and then people will post on them to have seniority, and then they'll bump people around because
Yeah.
of that. And then that always kind of got down to you. So basically, the quality of life on the railroad was not anything that I was looking for at my age of 37 years old.
Right.
So I was kind of tired of that after about a little over a year. And then that winter, It was actually February of that year. I had looked online and I noticed that they raised the enlisted age of the Air Force up to 39. And obviously, my wife being an Air Force veteran, so she had a lot of insight about it. Granted, she was basically 2 decades separated from it, but she had a lot of direct. She's this is how it is. This is
Oh, so she was a veteran before you joined.
way before I was joined.
Wow.
She did the military service when would be a more applicable age
Yeah.
of she went in at
Yep.
18, 19
yeah.
years old, whereas I was going in basically a seasoned or whatever middle-aged person.
Yeah.
It was definitely a very interesting situation, and I also knew that from talking with the coworkers I had at the time, and I started telling them that I was going to do this, they were all for it.
Yeah.
But they were saying, "Listen, this is a thing that you're gonna step into a pair of shoes that you probably haven't been in like 20 years,
Right.
and you need to just ride it out. Do what like whether you want to do your 4 or you think this is the end all thing for you and you want to retire from it. That's up to you."
Right. So what did you see enticing, like, by going into the military? Like, was it the end all be all, like you just serve to serve, or the 4 years?
Yeah, so I served because I always had in the back of my mind that I always thought that I kind of missed out on that opportunity when I was younger, and then not being totally informed about a lot of stuff and enlisted ages, I just kind of got past the age of like 21, 22, 23. I was just like, well, I'm never, I'm working on, I was going to
you already have
technical
your thing going
college,
on.
and I was moving on with my life.
Yeah.
So to revisit that when you're kind of in your late 30s and then have that opportunity was very enticing to me, because it gave me the abilities to not only go train on something else that I never really had a whole lot of experience with and get paid to do it, but then I'm going to have the military experience plus all the benefits that kind of roll with it.
Of course.
So and I went in kind of just like more or less kind of like open faith and kind of what the direction my life was going.
Of course.
So,
did you ever have a feeling, when you had that opportunity presented to you, of almost like carrying kind of like the torch of serving in the military as like your previous family members have? Because that's something that I feel, because my father, he served in the military for 20 years. And so, but he doesn't want me to go in the military because he built and served the 20 years and did all of this for me and my brother to not go to not go in the Army, to go to college and get a good career.
Right. So my dad didn't serve, my mom didn't serve. So as far as having, other than my dad's older brother,
right,
I didn't really have any, and then my wife and then her father. Those are like the 3 characters that people that I was in association with that had served. So as far as carrying a torch, that wasn't really like on what I was looking for. I was more looking forward. Pretty much, I just wanted to have a change of jobs.
Yeah.
And then through that, this is obviously serving in the military. You have all of that carries along with it. So it's not just coming in punching a time clock. You're serving, you're protecting, you got to make sure, like whether you are carrying a firearm or not, you are supplying some type of a service or some type of a deal. You have to make sure that what you're working on is 100% ready to go. Because I was basically the helicopters that I worked on, that was a rescue helicopter. So anytime you get a call,
it's got to be 100%.
And that sucker's got to have to fire it up. They got to they don't even taxi it in an emergency. They fire it up, do their quick run through. The crew's so efficient, the thing's up in the air before you can even think about it.
Wow. So, can you describe to me like the process of you jumping into the Air Force and then you getting your job as an electrician?
So the process was basically about, time-wise, I want to say February, March. So I went in May 9th of 2016. So basically chronologically, I started talking to a recruiter end of January, beginning of February, and then the one interesting thing that kind of stalled the process slightly is I needed to get another copy of my Social Security card.
Why is that?
Just because the one that I had was old and it was kind of tattered.
Really?
You could read the numbers on it. You can see that I signed it in pencil when I was probably like 12, you know? So the interesting thing about it is the post service in the Houston area is terrible.
Yeah.
I ordered that card 4 times before I got a copy. So that actually stalled me, I want to say probably close to a month and a half in that process.
Oh, jeez.
Right. And then the last copy, I had to go up in the Humble, and I sat at a Social Security office for probably about 2 hours to make sure that I got the copy in my hand.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, then I went back to the recruiter, and she thought I just whatever. She just thought it was a big waste of time. So I ended up supplying the proper document, then I could move forward. And that was like the big linchpin. And then after that, it was just basically setting up my ASVAB test, and I scored a cumulative of 77.
Wow.
But I was actually in the flight that I was in basic training. There was probably there had to be at least 12, 14 kids that scored probably around 90 or in the high 80s.
Wow.
So that's a whole nother deal. And then what dragged my scores down was the math and all that stuff because I'd been separated from that for a while.
I heard the ASVAB, they lowered the scores.
Yeah.
Recently.
And the thing is so that basically you take that test, and this is the deal. So they see where you basically score off of that.
Right.
And then you can go back to the recruiter, and they have a booklet of how those test scores fit into the jobs. So I scored a 77 cumulative, but I scored a 88 on my electrical capabilities, and I scored a 97 on my mechanical.
Wow.
Well, that's because I had years and years of experience, leg up on most people that took a test. I never met anybody the whole time I was in there that scored anything close to what I scored on the mechanical.
Wow.
And then actually I think the 3 questions I flubbed was basically carpentry. And I'm not a carpenter. I was a machinist. So
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But,
Wow. That's very interesting. I never understood. I don't know a lot about like the ASVAB and the process to do that, but I think that's very interesting how like you get an overall score and then separate scores
for
like, compared.
each block of the test. Yes.
So what? How many blocks are there on an ASVAB?
I did 4.
Okay. You
So-
can pick.
No, this is just ASVAB is a general test.
Right.
Now, granted, I want to say it is the same between all branches, but I could be corrected on that.
Okay.
So they ask you it's basically they give you, just like any type of skills battery assessment test. They start you probably at a certain grade level and or high school level of knowledge, and then like through the math, they started basically with subtraction, addition, and they went all the way through to through your college level algebra to some trigonometry. I knew the trigonometry stuff, but the algebra and stuff I was definitely foggy on it because I think the last time I took an algebra class would have been 1994. So, yeah.
Way before I was born. But,
yeah, and I wasn't that great at it then. So.
Yeah. So, how did you feel about your job as an electrician? Did it feel like an upgrade compared to what you were doing before?
Yeah, because I felt, going from like working on the railroad in Union Pacific as being as far as a diesel mechanic, the overall cleanliness of the job.
Yeah,
it was night and day different.
Oh, I wouldn't.
And then on top of it, okay, so being an electrician, that's not like for instance, there's like when you're a heavy equipment operator / technician or repair person,
right?
You lift a lot of heavy things, and there's a lot of heavy tools and stuff like that. Well, being an electrician, I mean, the heaviest thing you had, like for my experience, was like they had this kind of it was a kind of a box that they used for testing certain systems, and it was a homemade thing that I could totally tell that it was a government employee that probably took 2.5 years to make this on contract. And I'm looking at this box, and it was heavier than heck, and I was just like, man. Okay, and then so we actually, whenever we went out to the aircraft with this, we put it on a cart and we roll it out there. But that would be like the heaviest thing. The rest of it was just like you didn't even really, well, you could check out a toolbox and stuff like that,
right.
But that was more for the crew chiefs. But you just needed to make sure that you had a lead kit and your multimeter.
Yeah.
That was it. And then you had to have your TO. So you had to have basically your TO is your work instructions, and that was one thing that they chipped on me a couple of times. Well, more than a couple of times. Is I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this job and like how I run my business now. I mean, I'll read something on it and the tech data or whatever, and then I just go. Like for this morning, I got a job to do a starter in a Honda CR-V, and I never done a starter in a Honda CR-V, but I just know where the starter is, and I kind of know how to get underneath it, and I don't really follow directions while I'm working.
You kind of figure it out.
But in the military, it's all based upon people's experience. So you'd have to be basically upside down, curled up, and you're trying to find wires, and then they want you to have this laptop or iPad in front of you because you have to have your eyes on the TO and doing your job at the same time.
Really?
Which is kind of...
Like that was a required thing?
It totally required, and they'd write you up if you didn't do it.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and then you had different, and this goes into my experience with different types of supervisor/management.
Yeah.
And you have people that were they were good with their job, and then you'd have the people that, I'm not going to say any negative word, but they would be micromanagers.
Yeah. And
the micromanager, that type doesn't want to be in trouble for anything because somebody under their watch did something incorrect. Mm-hmm. So, you have a lot of, and then like that would be kind of one of the very interesting things that I had to not only witness and only interject in certain appropriate times, but watching that through the military as far as the work, the work environment.
Yeah.
In which you're a young man. I don't know exactly how old you are, but to have a certain type of supervisors that would be micromanagers, and then trying to apply what you have just went through because the tech school was like, geez, that would have been July, August, 4.5 months, 5 months, typical tech school. Yeah. You go through that, so then you're not really proficient at nothing, but they gave you enough ammunition. So everybody works at a different pace, different skill level, different ways they learn.
Yes.
And I've learned that basically two types of trade jobs before that: watching people in machine shops, watching people out like in mechanic shops and working in cars and trucks and whatever. You have different people that learn stuff, and you have different people that work at different speeds.
Yeah.
And in the military, based upon my understanding, because I achieved an E4. I was never.
Oh, wow.
I was just a senior airman. That's how when I got out, and I actually didn't want to test for staff because, first of all, I didn't want to take a seat for anybody because I knew I was getting out, and on top of it, it was kind of like I knew how they trained their NCOs.
Yeah. What do you mean kind of taking a seat for somebody?
Well, so they have, when you go through, it's basically kind of like time allotted. So you have time and rank.
Right.
And then when your time and rank comes up, then they basically they give you, they tell you that you're going to go take the test. Well, I walked into the squadron building in my personal deal, and I knew I was getting out. And I went in there, and nobody really did this, but I went and signed. I was just like, I'm not taking the test. They give you a chance to kind of opt out to do that, but you have to do it in an applicable time before your test date. You don't do it like the day of or whatever. And then I had already listened to younger people that even were planning on getting out ever going sitting in this test, and they would like just sit there and answer A all the way.
Christmas tree. Yeah.
But yeah, but not only is that a waste of resource, but there's enough people in that military branch that there's people that really want to give it all, and they want to serve, and they want to have applicable time in, and they're trying to find rank. So basically, there's only so many slots when like when they open up for staff. So the staff is like the basically the junior NCO position.
Right.
It's E5 in the Air Force. So they only have so many people they take. Okay, so if you have somebody that's not a great tester or whatever, but they really, really want the stripe, and they want to try to build themselves better, then you have some other person that's just there going through the motions, but yet might be kind of a halfway decent test taker, and they just blip, 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 and then they award that stripe to that person that doesn't really want to be there, or the person that really wanted to be there but wasn't a great test taker or had some type of issues doesn't get the stripe. So you have that. That's reality. That's life. So, I was old enough. I'm just like, I'm not putting. Hopefully, whatever seat, whoever took my seat or however that transpired, hopefully that person got the stripe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can definitely understand, after hearing everything going on with my dad, with the VA, and also him getting out of the military, and also the past veterans that I've interviewed, hearing them get out of the military, it can involve a lot of shenanigans.
Yeah.
Also, I'm 20, by the way. So,
All right.
But yeah, no, I completely understand. The just the workforce and the difference in that. I don't have a lot of experience in the workforce, but I can definitely see like the difference between in the military, where it's like everyone has to learn and work and operate at the same way and the same frequency compared to real life, where that's not true.
Right.
People just work and operate different from everyone else.
Right. And to kind of go down that avenue with you, from my experience, I had some conversations with NCOs and senior NCOs who I was actually older than, and had some pretty open conversations, but usually behind closed doors or away from everybody else.
Yeah.
And I could tell just in the demeanor of the conversation which people had the wherewithal as far as being just a normal person and addressing things, whether they're good or bad, addressing them appropriately. Because if you're a senior NCO and you've been in X amount of years, and then you're handling people that getting DWIs and other type of serious things, you have to and you have the UCMJ that you're following. That's the military code of justice. That's telling you how you have to discipline that person.
Yeah. By
all means. But when you have a person that's kind of a know-it-all Joe kind of person, and or the micromanager, they'll apply things or they'll twist things in a way. And I saw it now. Like some people, like really inappropriately got hammered,
and that disrupts the entire work environment.
It's not good for a big military thing. It's not good for morale.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you want to work for somebody that just hammered somebody because he basically, lost a screw when he was transporting a part into a hangar?
And I feel like another thing is like not a lot. I don't have a. I might just be, spouting this out, but I feel like a lot of it is not behind closed doors. It's, for people, for everyone to see,
Well, so that's kind of like, so I didn't, obviously, like I was describing before, I didn't go through all the classes and all of that stuff as far as their NCO stuff.
Right.
But there's people, it's like, there's something like you being 20 years old. You're very susceptible and seeing things and then eventually kind of repeating it.
Yeah.
Okay. But then the older you get, you look at things and you kind of like rethink things in your head and be like, okay, maybe this should be maybe taking a step back, taking a deep breath, don't say the wrong thing, act more appropriately or professionally. There's certain ways to emotionally diffuse a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when a person that's younger that gets to my age and this is all they've done and this is how they were trained and then they saw this stuff over and over and over and over again, they're going to repeat that.
Yeah.
So if they're going to be the person that yells at people, which I get it, we're in the military, but on the other side of the coin, we work in a shop.
Mm-hmm.
In the real world, when you work in a shop and you start yelling, usually, like, almost, you know, like, unless you had some type of problem where the company is like, okay, well, maybe this off his meds or something that day, then they would pull you aside or they pull you out of the building. You probably would be losing your job.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they think you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
In the military, no.
Yeah, they think it's normal.
So, yeah, that's just like, oh, yeah, you know.
It is what it is.
Sergeant Fred got a little upset today.
Yeah.
You know, and he had to yell at so-and-so.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, you had already a lot of experience going into the military.
Right.
So what do you think, do you feel like there was any impact that the military gave to you, like reflecting back on your service?
Absolutely. I think you can basically, not only just in the military or going through college or whatever, you can always learn something.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, not being stereotypical, I believe that just me stepping back in those shoes and walking, you know, the 3.5, 4 years that I did, it just was kind of like let me replay stuff from back in my teenage and early 20s and let me kind of really get myself actually re-grounded. Now, one of the things that I did do, to go back to that one question, as far as, so you have the process, you have the
Yep.
you know, the recruiter, and then you take the test, and then you go to go through MAPS. Well, one of the things that I did after I went past MAPS and they gave me the official date that I'm going to report for duty, I ended up getting married.
Oh, wow.
And so I was with my girlfriend, then wife, for 9 years, and then we were together now 7. So she knew the situation, like, you know, if we're going to make a go of this, we get married because you don't know where you're going. So we did that. And then, so she was a soundboard in good and bad for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reprocessing a lot of things in my life. And so seeing what I was seeing at work and, you know, sitting on my hands and just doing my job and being cool and calm, and that's my demeanor. And then you have Sergeant Fred comes into the room, wants to kick over a chair,
Yeah.
and yell at some 18-year-old airman for whatever, having his hands in his pocket.
Yeah.
And that's a thing in the military.
I heard. I think I heard from Ed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't do that. And then the other thing, when you're carrying things, you always carry things in your left hand.
Huh.
You know why that is?
Mm-mm.
In case you have to render a salute to an officer.
Oh.
It's one of the primary things, yes.
Very interesting.
And it's also a safety OSHA thing, slip and fall, so you have a hand to brace yourself.
Oh.
But yeah, you need to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And believe me, that whole deal, the customs and courtesies things, I understood.
Yeah.
And obviously I did, you know, the best I could. There's a couple times, like, I mean, you know, I straight up, there was one time I was going to the chow hall with another younger airman, and we saw this female captain coming out of where we were going for lunch. It was actually like a Friday evening. We were working second shift. And we were going past her on a sidewalk. We rendered her salutes, and she just kind of looks to her right in the grass, and she doesn't even acknowledge us. She's right past us. I'm like, hey, maybe that's another person that thinks about customs and courtesies about the same thing I do. I think we already have, you know, enough, you know, common courtesy and professionalism. I mean, a lot of that stuff is just old school. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
you know, yeah, I agree with you there. You know, but I guess it's really just culture. Just
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, it is.
it's just culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting seeing all the weird traditions and stuff being passed down.
Yeah, and that would go back to how you're answering, question about that as far as like tradition and carrying it on. I mean, the custom and courtesies, you're in military service, you're in uniform, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
You do it. It's the same thing as like having a job and they have a certain workplace rules and stuff like that. You do it and you abide by the guidelines because you're playing on their playground.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter where it is.
When in Rome.
Right, and then that also, when you have that knowledge and or accept that situation, the situation becomes easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
Even though way back in your head you're like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But we're gonna do this today.
Yeah.
So
if someone were to like come up to you, just a stranger, and be like, hey, you were in the military, what do you think I could get out of the military? What would you say to them?
I'd ask them where they're going first.
Mm.
Because whether you decide to enlist and or depending upon if you have if say you graduate college, you can go commission to become an officer in a branch of service if you want to do that.
Mm.
And that lifestyle is phenomenal from what I've heard and I've seen. So it does two things. It either gives you a sense of direction or changes your sense of direction.
Hmm.
So I would be a great example of that, because if I decided to stay at Union Pacific and go past that date of enlisting, I would have ended up getting laid off from that job in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd still be in the Houston area working at some level. Probably a mechanic or something, or
but not really
possibly
growing.
I would have moved back up to Milwaukee, because I had like even when I got out of the military the summer of 2020, I had a friend of mine that worked for GE. He's been working there for 20 years. He had machining positions that were $34-$35 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. I was making 31 at Union Pacific before I got out.
Wow.
So when I was telling people that in the military what I was making and I chose to do this,
that's
they
mind
thought I was
blowing.
crazy.
Yeah.
They thought I was nuts.
I think the
and
same.
I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, you're nuts. And I was like, I know what I'm kind of doing here, because I know what the end result leads to. I mean, I'm just trying to be a middle-aged person and opening up a door that was possibly closed a long time ago.
Of course.
So
I really like that answer of, the two options of either changing direction or giving you a sense of direction, because that's something
that's
that
it.
yeah,
that's it.
That's as simple as you can explain it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so how was getting out of the military? Like, how did COVID kind of play into that? Because I'm interested to know.
Okay, so
Ed was a little similar.
Okay, so I actually kind of played some cards out, and and this is basically kind of going back on the benefits of being in the military.
Yeah.
So I don't know, how many people have you interviewed so far?
About 5 or 6.
Okay. Has any one of those people participated in the Skills Bridge program?
Not that I've known of.
Okay. So that's a growing program that was started by the Army probably now about 10 years ago. And it's now gone on to all branches.
Wow.
Well, basically what it is when you know that you're either separated or getting towards the end of your retirement, whether you're an officer, enlisted, whatever that may be, you can get into a 6-month program that's basically you're getting paid at your rank for 6 months, but yet you go take a job with a place, or you can go start an apprenticeship or internship, whatever that may be. So you could be a white-collar, blue-collar job, whatever you want to do, or if you want to just go back to your hometown and work at the auto parts store.
Wow.
So as long as the receiving people accept that and they do the correct paperwork and the commander of your unit signs off on it, then you're given the blessing and you can participate in this, and then they let you out process, then you leave.
Wow.
So I kind of knew with my demeanor and how everything was going, I was just like, all right, I'm not doing this obviously until I'm 65. I'm bouncing. So I decided to do the Skills Bridge program. So I got out, technically, I was in Houston, Texas, November 15th, 2019, 6 months early. Historically, but not so long ago, what happened in the spring of 2020.
Yeah.
So if I didn't take that Skills Bridge, which might I add was a fantastic program.
Oh, yeah.
Because
that sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I had a friend of mine that I'd worked at Union Pacific with that he had left the railroad because he didn't like how everything was going there, and he had taken a job. So he was a head automotive technician at this shop that was basically in the southwestern corner of the Houston area, almost in Missouri City area. So I ended up working there for 6 months.
Wow.
I was getting paid by the Air Force until I was technically out. So I ended up getting a paycheck through like the first 2 weeks of June of that year. And
That's
I was
amazing.
way out. And yeah, and then I also was reacclimating myself with automotive work.
Of course.
So, I was doing alignments, all the, more basic stuff, the brakes and suspension and stuff, and then I was getting into more automotive wiring, because that was one thing that I never really did before, because I thought I didn't have much of an electrical background, and I went through, and that experience was good.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm using every day, I use everything that I've learned from the Air Force.
Right.
I was never a huge jockey with a multimeter. Now I whatever you want me to do, let's
easy.
do it. Yeah,
easy.
A piece of cake.
Too easy. That's awesome. So, I mean, was it a little bit difficult to transition back into like automotive, like electrical work compared like when you got out of the military?
I would have to say the type of work wasn't really that hard for me, because I had a real strong background in it in one way or the other. But as far as reminding myself on how regular shop etiquette and going from what day-to-day work environment in the military is to basically working in a service/tire shop off of Bissonnet in Houston, where you can walk right across the street and get iguana for lunch on Fridays. And then you're walking past people on the street, and they're whatever. Somebody will probably ask you for $1 down there, but versus walking on the military base, and then you have the customs and courtesies, and everybody's in the same uniform, and everybody's got the same. You have you have to be shaved and certain haircuts and all of that stuff. I personally more like the civilian thing.
Really?
That's because I'm a laid-back, natured person.
Yeah.
So, like, transitioning things, it was, I would have to say it would be probably a little less culture shock than it would be if, say, somebody, was uprooted from their town when they're 18, 19, just knowing that.
Of course.
And then they went and did, and then most of those younger people, they ended up getting, because they didn't have any college or anything, they got talked into more like 6-year stints, not 4. Because I had an associate's degree and stuff like that, so they gave me an extra stripe out of the box.
Wow.
So I was able to kind of just do the 4 thing and be an A1C from the get-go. But when you come down as you're a slick sleeve or a basic airman, and you're going to come in for 6, so that person, they were 19, 25. That's all you saw. So now you get out, you're 25, you're like, oh, yeah, this is great. I'm getting in the real world, whatever. I can go smoke marijuana and stuff like that. And that's kind of one of the things, too. And now all of a sudden they're just like, they get into a work environment, and they actually like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is real life stuff. These people, you have a whole gamut of people that really don't care to be there to people that really care to be there. And then they, for their whatever reasons, military, it's more narrow stream. Because everything has certain rules.
Exactly.
And it's some people have a hard time adjusting and then readjusting from that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you're jumping straight in like when you're young, and then falling into the real world where people have already spent those 4 to 6 years working on that career, and you just got there and just started. It's tough. It's tough having to like kind of. It feels like you're kind of catching up a bit.
Yes.
So, so how did you get into the Fort Myers area?
My wife wanted to move down here.
Huh.
And I was kind of freewheeling at the time. So basically, my Skills Bridge thing ended in May, and then we left Houston. It would have been beginning of end of May, early June. and I went up to Milwaukee for that summer, and my parents were getting to, my dad wasn't doing very well at the time, and it was crazy, the scenario so I had the whole summer to kind of just think about things, and I had some money saved up in that whole deal. So I went up to kind of do some caretaking and help cleaning out the house a little bit, and it wasn't 24 hours after I drove my Firebird. I got a 78 Firebird that I've owned for like years. Whew. I drove that Firebird. I put an AC system in it when I was working at that shop, and I took the 373 gears, put 308s in it so I could drive it on the freeway.
Oh, wow.
So I drove that from Houston to Milwaukee. My wife followed me in the pickup truck that I bought down there, loaded with all of our stuff. And then separating from the military, you got one last move. So we took that move, and basically they stored our stuff for up to 6 months. And then so we had this period of time where, okay, we can kind of, go up to Milwaukee for this period of time. My wife and I, we didn't really have a conversation. I expected that she was going to stay in the Houston area, but then she wanted to come up with me, and that's a totally different thing. It's more of a domestic conversation. But so we went up for that summer. She went to her dad's place. She had lost her mom in 2018 or 2019, and then a day after I got there, drove up there, and then that next day we were going to get pizza from our favorite pizza place. I ended up getting the order, dropped the pizza off at my parents' house, and I was going to go up by my father-in-law's and eat dinner with my wife and my father-in-law. And I got a phone call when I was up there that my dad had some type of it was more of like a seizure, because he has multiple sclerosis. And and then after that, his health just kind of like, he was in the hospital for a couple weeks, and then he had to go into rehab center that locked him down for a month. So he didn't get out of that until basically August.
Yeah.
And then after that, or it was like end of July or August, and then after that, it was kind of like taking care of him. He bounced back pretty well, but then the following year, after we had moved down here, I think my sister told me he'd been in and out of the hospital probably 12 times in a year.
Oh, yeesh.
Yeah, it was he ended up passing away last year in June, but it was like, but I just have that weird luck with how my life works, is because I ended up getting laid off from a job that I was working in Wisconsin and in the Milwaukee, Waukesha area at the time in 2009, in June of 2009. So I was able, not only was I available, but right when I was laid off, but my grandparents were kind of getting to that point. And my dad's youngest brother just came into town. They were assessing the situation, so I ended up helping them with the daycare, elderly care kind of thing. So for some reason, that's how my life is timed out. There's been 2 segments of my life. I helped my grandparents kind of towards their end, and then I helped my dad.
It's weird how life works like that.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's like how it gives you time to do things, and you need to take care of business.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, doors open up at just the right time you need them. So coming up near the end of the interview here, so I wanted to ask, what do you think, if there's one thing that people could do, whether it be, your own family or just the community as a whole, what's one thing that people can do for veterans, or do better for veterans?
Do better?
Well, yeah, just kind of do better to help veterans, or just benefit veterans.
So from my perspective, and I'll make this, this could be a really long answer, make this short. From what I saw when I was in high school in the mid-90s to now, I think you've already vastly improved, not only embracing people going into the military, but also the veterans themselves after they're out of service, retired, whatever may be, whatever their capacity was. So the only way I could say to make it better is continuing on what you're doing already. Because there's new ways, and you keep, there's certain, obviously there's more programs, there's more access to everything than there ever has been.
Yep.
And I'm talking like my father-in-law, he was in the Army for 2 years pre Vietnam, and he was actually stationed. He actually was part of his 2 years. He was in South Korea, and he was camping on the 38th parallel.
Wow.
And he saw, like, you know, there, like, and this is 1964, so he saw, like, there would be waves of North Koreans that would come through, and they'd shoot them up, and yeah.
Wow.
So and then like, so he saw a lot. Then my uncle, he went in. He basically had a college degree. He went into the Marine Corps in 1967. Not a very popular move.
Yeah.
And so their stories, that's the types of people I talked to as a kid, and how they got out of their service, and how, not, I wouldn't say, you know, a lot of them had stories or would even want to remind themselves of stories that were real poor, like, you know, getting spit on and all, how they just treated them like garbage in some ways. So that is total 180 from what it was. So, and then the other thing is like, I'm sure there's guidance counselors and stuff nowadays that are more willing and open-minded to young people approaching them, depending upon where their position is in high school, and helping them kind of push them in a direction.
Yeah.
Because I grew up kind of more in the suburbs atmosphere, and the guidance counselor, like, I had a technical program that I wanted to get into, and that person didn't even know what it was. But in their lobby, in front of their office, was a turnstile with all WCTC literature on it, and it was sitting right there.
Huh.
But they didn't know the program I was getting into. So if anything, continue how this is going, and over time people will be more and more educated about what veterans, how you offer programs to veterans and keep opportunities and stuff open, because these people did put in a section of their life, whether it was younger, older, or if they put their 20-something years in or longer, and then they get back out, you know, so they have that adjustment period, and, you know, offer somebody the ability to go do something else.
Yeah.
And that's already there.
Yeah.
It's just, and I think that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's it.
Well, yeah, that's a really good answer. And, you know, thank you a lot. I really appreciate your time and being able to finally get you in here. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, thank you.